Hey folks, I need you to share the love. Jenny has been doing such a phenomenal job at keeping the energy up, so can we just give her a huge round of applause? So, don't believe everything you read on the internet. It's not just the title of this session, but also good advice to follow in general in your life. Hello everyone, I'm thrilled to be here with all of you and sharing in this experience at the first of its kind conference for community builders in Prague. We are making history here together, and it's very, very exciting. I hope that we can continue to work together to ensure that these type of gatherings continue to happen. When I learned about the theme of the conference, I reflected on my career and my journey, as one usually does, and I asked myself, what does it mean to be a rebel? How have I been a rebel in my life? And I thought back all the way back before I had about 50 gray hairs to when I was very, very young. And I just want to ask you all very quickly, if you don't mind, because we're all being vulnerable, raise your hand if you were born before the 1990s, okay? And raise your hand if you were born after 1990. Great. So I want to share a little bit about the generation that I grew up in. I grew up in a time when there really wasn't a huge adoption of the internet, but I was quickly introduced to it. You know, I grew up when I was still using the library. I would go to the library, read the category cards, try to find the book I was looking for, and do research that way. And then I went online, and there was a huge world to explore. It was around this time that it was also very common to get a lot of pop-ups on your computers. There was also a lot of chain mail and email. So you very quickly learned not to click everything that you saw on your screen, and definitely don't believe everything you saw on your computer screen. It was also around this time that I started to explore making connections with people online. And at the time, I really felt like it was something fun that I did, just something else to do. I thought my career was taking me to a place between science and technology. But as maybe some of you can relate to, I became an accidental community manager. I kind of just stumbled into it. And when I joined, I was learning from who I thought were some of the greats. There were people who had been doing this work for decades before me, but I could really count them on my fingers. There weren't that many. As the profession grew, I started to see how we focused a lot of our time on building legitimacy. We wanted to be taken seriously as a profession. We wanted a seat at the table. And as all of this was going on, I thought to myself, what's my place in this story? How can I continue to succeed when big promises are being made? Eventually, the thought leaders, the gurus, the people who had very, very loud voices started making big promises. They were saying every company should have a community. Every company should have a chief community officer. Community-led is the way. Community is the solution to everything. Those are really pretty words, but it's a lot to live up to. It's a big promise. And as this was being said, I felt to myself that failure is not really an option. We have to talk about being successful, about accomplishments. And as all of these promises were being made, I was actually going through a very difficult time in my career where I was really being shaken up because a lot of the truths that I had learned, others had used, that had been successful, were not working. In this time of uncertainty, when I felt very alone because I couldn't share those failures, those challenges, because we were trying to move forward as a profession, I found freedom in something that I'd learned way back in school in science class. It was experiments. We all remember that when we're hosting experiments, failure is a part of the process. It's something that you document, you talk about it, you're analyzing it, it's in your conclusion, and if it fails, you just try again. So it was in this stage of running community experiments that I finally felt freedom. And this brings me back to the theme of the conference. This is the way that I rebelled. When people were talking about great successes, only good things happening, I wanted to talk about the times when there were failures. And I'll share with you all very quickly what the framework is to run your own community experiments. At the end of the session, you'll get a worksheet so you too can run your own community experiment. So let's talk about it. Why would you conduct a community experiment? Usually because you want to test some type of theory. Let's say that you are tasked with owning a part of the gamification strategy for your community, and as a part of this, you're considering badges. Try out a community experiment to see how 3 badges do, how your members react to them, instead of spending time and resources into creating 100 beautiful badges that your members might not even care about. You might also be looking to request additional budget for a tool, and you're hearing a lot of no's. What if you signed up for a free trial of the tool, and then you conducted an experiment to see how using the tool helped your community? If there's good results, now you have evidence for your business case to show that you really need to buy it. So there's a lot of different use cases. There's also 3 things that you should keep in mind before you move forward, before you try this at home. The first one is to ask yourself, is this experiment ethical? All of our communities are composed of people, and as community builders, we have a responsibility to look out for their rights and to protect them. Second question, do your people know? And not just your manager, not your just team, but perhaps demand gen, your field sales team, your legal team, are people looped in? Number 3, is there a conflict? It could be as simple as, is there a conflict with something that's currently going on with your community? Is there a summer campaign, engagement campaign? It could also tie back to ethics. Is there an ethical conflict? So 3 questions to ask before proceeding. Next, we're going to talk about what you actually need. And it was really important to me for this session that I was going to speak with you all to show that you don't need all the bells and whistles to run a community experiment. You really only need your community to understand what data you have access to, something to do math with. If you're a math whiz and it's your brain, great, I'm not. You also need something to take notes with. So for everything I'm going to share with you, I had an online community, I had a platform, I had a member identifier. I could know when people logged in, when they posted, and what they were liking on the community. I used a Google spreadsheet for math, and I used a Google Doc. Pretty simple. So, who remembers learning about the scientific method? Raise your hand. Great. Was it 5 steps? Raise your hand. 7? It's okay. I won't quiz you all on it. So let's just recap. You start by making an observation. You then ask a question. You then form a hypothesis. You're going to test the hypothesis. You do the experiment to test it. And at the end of the experiment, you're going to draw a conclusion based off the results. Usually at this point, you can end, or you might end up iterating and conducting another experiment. So what does it actually look like in practice? I'm going to tell you all about a conversation I had with a fellow community builder. They had worked on an onboarding email for their community, and it was a huge cross-functional initiative. They brought in marketing, customer success, support, product, and they all worked on this email together. But the community manager made an observation that this great email, none of the members were looking at it. It didn't seem like they were opening it or clicking on it. So we had a conversation, and this is when we started, looking at the email and asking ourselves, could it be that the subject line just kind of sucks? It's very long, and you don't know what you're getting yourself into. So we formed a hypothesis, and what we ended up testing was sending out an email for 2 months with a very catchy subject line and a full understanding of what people were going to open. At the end of those 2 months, the open rate, which on average was about 4%, moved up to 43%. Then we asked, great, people are now opening the email, but they're not really clicking on it. And to give you all context of this email, it was beautiful. There was a video. There were contracts that the members had to review, code of conduct. There were tips and tricks. There were customer stories. as I'm talking, you're probably getting the feeling that this email was really long, really, really long. So we went back to the drawing board and we said, what's the one thing that your community member really needs to understand to start getting value from participating in your community? What's in it for them? And again, we ran an experiment, we cut the email. There was really only one clear action item for them. And at the end of this experiment, their click rate went from about 1% to 5%. Now, some of you are sitting here and thinking, obviously this worked, email marketing 101, very simple, change the subject, change the body. But here's one of the reasons why I want to share this with you all. This community manager was facing a lot of red tape in their organization. They had worked with many departments to put together this email. You might find yourself in that situation where you're trying to change something, you're trying to say no, but you can't move forward. They now have evidence to show that it was time to change their approach. So now I want to talk about some of those failures, some of those truths that were really being put to the test. The first community universal truth that always held me together in my career was onboard your members with a personalized message. It makes sense. Your members know what they're getting themselves into, what value they can get from the community. They might be able to better adopt the platform. And it also makes people feel special. They're getting a personal reach out from you. So in this community that I was building, I made the observation that members were not participating as much as I would hope after joining. So I asked a question. What would happen if we did send a personalized direct message to them within 14 days of joining the community? We ran the test. We had a group of about 50 people. The personalized message was simple. It was, here's who I am, here's why I'm reaching out to you, here's a clear action item, here's value that you could get from the community, and here's a recommendation of what you should do and where you should go to get started. At the end of the 2 months, I got 6 direct messages, 24 visits, 1 person posted. So what I was looking to measure were the community activities of visits, likes, and posts. In this case, as long as they visited the community, it counted as at least 1 community activity. So that's the 30% that you're seeing here. Not so good. For the second experiment, I said, I think I'm just too slow. I'm not reaching them as soon as I should. So the only thing that changed in this experiment was from sending the message from 14 days to 1 day. Here you can see that it actually got worse. Only 12.5% of the group completed at least 1 community activity. So by the second failure, I said, all right, so it's not the timing, it's just that I'm not being personal enough. I'm not really reaching them. So this time, I made 80 videos, 1 for each person that joined. And I said, this one's really gonna work. People are really gonna engage and participate. At the end of those 2 months, I had 10 people who loved the video. They did message me. But only about 26.25% of the group completed at least 1 activity. So to put that into context, I had a baseline for around the average of how many of the new members were at least completing 1 community activity. It was a little over 40% on average, and you can see that all these experiments kind of failed. So second universal truth, and this one is reward your members for participating. This works really well. How many of you give out swag to members? A couple of you. Badges, points? I think, okay. This has worked really well for me, and it makes sense. It's something where we are furthering the commitment curve from members, we are reinforcing positive behavior, and a lot of members tend to like it. There's different ways to do it. So I tried it with this community, and I said, when I catch someone doing something that I want them to do, like posting on the community, I'm gonna reach out to them, and I'm gonna offer them the swag of their choice. This time, tried it out with 50 people for 1 month, and again, I was testing to see if they would at least visit the community, post, or like something on the community. At the end of the experiment, we had 27 people visit the community, 4 posts, and 3 like something. With the second experiment, this time I said, maybe they don't like swag. You know, we're all moving to sustainability. So I'm going to send them a handwritten thank you card. I wrote 50 handwritten thank you cards, and I sent them to members right after they did something that I wanted them to continue to do. At the end of this experiment, 37 visited the community and 11 liked something. So by the second experiment, I said, you know, I have a survey that I sent out to members. And in that survey, they shared with me that what they really want is access to the product team. They want more exclusivity. So for the third experiment, I said, I'm going to reward them with the access and the exclusivity that they're asking for. So I'm going to create an event that is only meant for them if they are participating, and this will give them that reward that they shared, that they asked for. At the end of this experiment, 42 visited the community, 3 posted, and 1 liked. So back again into context. This one's a little tough because the group that I was looking at, they had all visited because they did have to complete an activity. I had a group of about 60% who had posted on the community before, and about 40% who had liked in the community. So as it stacks out, you can see it didn't really seem to make too much of a positive effect. So I failed a lot, and you might be thinking, why am I learning about this if it's something that ends up with failure? The thing is, after running all these experiments, I learned things that I wouldn't have without running the experiments. I realized that the way that we were reaching out to members, the tool that we were using, was not effective. I also learned that there were better ways in which I could reach out to these members. We ended up having better results by actually partnering with our post-sales team to do demos with the members. And instead of rewarding members who were participating, there was more success in targeting members who had recently gone inactive or teasing new members into what potential there was in the community. So I say to all of you, you might see a lot of great advice and truths out there, but before you really test them out, before you really pull it off in a big way, see if it works for your community. All of our communities are different, they're unique, just like we as people are very different. And by running a community experiment, you're gonna understand what methods work for you and which ones do not. So here's the resource that I promised. Feel free to scan this QR code or go to this link. It's gonna give you a worksheet. You don't have to fill out all of the sections, just fill out what's applicable to you. I'm gonna pause, I see people scanning. Okay, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I want to thank you all so much for joining us here, being here with us.